Good afternoon. So I'm coming here today because I want to give a brief testimony as to how I came to Jesus Christ. Um, haven't really done a formal testimony, and I kind of want to give a testimony um, to put it out there because as a child of God, giving a testimony is important in order to bring other people over into the light of Jesus Christ, to the walk with Jesus Christ, to the everlasting life of Jesus Christ. So I thought it was my duty to finally give a brief testimony. Now, my testimony can be extremely long, but I'm just going to hit on certain points throughout my journey that brought me to where I am today. And where I am today is I'm still discovering who Jesus is. I'm still trying to accept the reality of where I'm living, which is here on this earth. Um, I know that I am no longer part of this world, but I am in this world. So um, and most of the time, watching a lot of testimonies or even hearing some of the scripture, it says that you need to set yourself apart from the rest of the world. And I, fortunately or unfortunately, however you look at it, um, wasn't really given the option to set myself apart from the world. I was made to be set up, like, you understand in my testimony what I mean by that. Like, I didn't choose to set myself apart from the world. I was basically awakened, and at the time of me being awoken, I was set up. Part of that being awakened period was being set apart from the world. So it wasn't like a choice, if that makes any sense. So anyway, here's my testimony. About 3.5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, I had just lost my job. I was living in Chicago. I had just lost my apartment, and I was going through a really, really rough time. Had just picked up a severe drug habit. I was doing meth for about a year at this point, um, before losing my job in my apartment. Though the drugs had nothing to do with me losing my apartment and job directly, it definitely had something to do with it indirectly. I don't want to get into it, but let's just say it wasn't because I was high or missing work, but the drugs did definitely play a factor. Um, right around this time is when I will call the targeting. I hate using that term, but I will call it targeting because it is a target of the devil, even though it's physically played out here in this world. It is spiritually charged, meaning that everything is that happens to a targeted individual is actually happening behind the scenes, and it's manifested in the physical world. So anyway, um, the first time the spiritual world manifested into the physical world for me, the targeting. I was living in Chicago, but I didn't know that that's what it was. It just was a scary event that happened that literally freaked me out to the point where I left everything. I actually left my job and left my apartment on my own because I was so freaked out by what was happening at this point in my life. And I took a train ride from Chicago back to my hometown of Philadelphia, and just left my apartment, left my job, and my car, and just hopped on a train the next day because I was that freaked out by what was going on in my life at that time. Um, so I came back to Philadelphia and I stayed with my parents. And at this time, I should tell you, I was not a believer in God. I, what you would call agnostic. Like I believed in a higher power, I just didn't know what. So I was always searching. I always was dabbling in different philosophies and doctrines of other religions and things like that, just to see what they believed and if it resonated to me. And nothing really stuck. Um, I did like a lot of the Eastern philosophies like Buddhism and Taoism. It sounded great on paper, but it never really stuck. I just always would go back to that as something that I could use when I wanted something spiritual, if that makes any sense. The yin and the yang, there's an opposite to everything, good and evil, that type of thing. Taoism, karma, all of those things. I mean, to me, it just made sense, especially not having a spiritual foundation. Those were just go tos, so to speak. So anyway, I wound up back in Philadelphia, but I did not stop using drugs. In fact, now that I didn't have a job and I cashed out my 401k and was hoping to get unemployment, which never ended up happening, I began to go deeper into drugs and become more of an addict because now I had no responsibilities at this point. I was living at home. I didn't have a job. I eventually got my car back from Chicago, and I drove around and did the whole drug world thing. Meeting people, doing drugs, that whole sex, that whole scene. Um, Eventually, what started happening was I started having little confrontations with everyone, and nothing that spoke to me for it to be serious. It was just, it seemed like everyone I was coming into contact with, I was having like friends, think people I knew and things like that. I was just having confrontations with them, and it was becoming a lot. It was more than normal. But anyway, at this time, I was so heavy into the drugs, and uh, my best friend was living at home with his mom, and I basically kind of wind up living with them. And we were doing drugs together, my best friend and his mother and myself. And we were doing little uh, white collar uh, schemes, you would call them. I don't know, like little white collar capers in order to get money. Uh, for them, actually, I mean, they were already doing these white collar scheme capers, and I came in and just joined the fold with them because I wasn't making any money. They were already doing these things that you could basically say I was influenced by what they were already doing. But I also was the person who had the connection for the drugs. So while they were doing the capers in order to get money, I was the one supplying the drugs, so to speak. Eventually, that came to a head. Me and my best friend of 15 or 16 years at that time had a big blowout, and I still to this day don't know the reason why. Well, I know now, but there was still never a real reason why we had a blowout. I mean, yes, we were doing drugs, but me and him were very, very close. And any arguments, and we've had tons of arguments over the years, but somehow this felt really different. And it's been, like I said, almost 3 years now, and we still haven't talked, and I don't think we ever will. But during that time, I knew that it was the end of our friendship. I don't know why. It was something I felt, and we got into a huge argument, and I was close with his family, his mom, his stepdad, his sisters, and they all just kind of turned on me. So I left that part of my life behind, and I still was doing drugs. And I met a couple of other people who I started to get involved with, and through the relationships that I had, um, the people that I was meeting, I was still having these confrontations, and I wound up um, becoming uh, involved with someone, and we were together for about four months, and then that relationship just became tumultuous. We were both drug addicts, so that of course that relationship just became out of control, tumultuous arguments every single day until eventually um, we actually got arrested together, and I didn't go to jail. I got and we were arrested, and they found drugs, and um, I was put on probation. I was in like the little county jail for about 3 hours. They booked me and then let me go. So now I was on probation at this point. Um, we split, and then I got involved with another person. Now during this time, little weird things started happening. Like, of course, I was on drugs, and this targeting thing is very easy when you're on drugs because what happens when you're on drugs is that you can just be looked at, you can be discredited easy. So no matter what you say, if it's bizarre or anything weird, everyone will just attribute it to the fact that you're a drug addict or that you're on drugs, and they won't believe you. So it's very easy for a person who is involved in drugs to be discredited as crazy or schizo or sketched, especially with the drug I was doing, which was meth. I mean, you hear all types of stories about meth, but I never had an episode on meth that was uh, a weird one. Like, I mean, I know that people act weird on drugs, but I call me naive or whatever, but I never had a psychotic episode while I was on the drugs. Did I get paranoid sometimes? Looking back, I don't know if I was paranoid or if it was actually what was starting to begin to manifest now. Did it seem like I was paranoid? Yes, of course. But like I said, looking back on it now, I don't know if it was the beginning of what was always there or if it was actually really the drugs. I do know that the drugs was a gateway or a portal into the dark side, especially meth. Okay, I know that now. I didn't know that back then because I was not really aware of a spiritual aspect of life. Like spiritual, yes, like Buddhism, Taoism, yes, like good and evil, day and night, yeah, I believed in that. But in actual, like actual spiritual beings, no, or that there was like a spiritual another world or another realm that was spiritual. No, never believed in anything like that. In fact, I was more of a science guy. Like it needed to be tangible in order for me to believe in it. So, uh, doing drugs to me, I never thought I was opening up any portals or gates into a different realm or anything like that. It's just not where my head was. But anyway, I got involved with this other person, and during this involvement with this other person, things started to manifest in real life that was just strange. First, I started seeing cars that was the same. Like I kept seeing the same type of car, no matter where I went, the same car over and over and over and over and over and over. And then one day, the person I was involved with said that they saw the same exact thing, and it freaked me out because now it's like, okay, I'm not imagining this. This is actually happening. And once I realized that it was happening, it became nonstop. And what I mean by that is I started having people constantly around me. And when I mean people constantly around me, I mean people from all over, people I didn't know, strangers. They were constantly always surrounding me no matter where I went. They were following me in my car. I saw people staring at me. They just wanted to be next to me, and it was scary. It was overwhelming. It was frightening, and I had no idea what it was. And no matter where I went, they were always there. And then I started noticing that they can hear me. Like if I would say something or do something, they would react to it. If I would make fun of one of them, then everyone around would laugh at the joke. It seemed like. So I started noticing that not only were they following it and always in my space, but they were also in my head somehow. And it started to freak me out even more. Eventually, I broke up with the relationship I was in because that got weird as well. That person would just disappear for days at a time, and I wouldn't know where the person was, and I was still going through being stalked, so to speak. And then like other bizarre things would start happening. I would start seeing helicopters, or there would be color patterns or synchronization of like cars. Like one day I will walk out and it may be an all red, white, and blue car day, and that's the only type of color car I would see all day was red, white, and blue, or I would see all white cars, or I would see all black cars. Then it started becoming more bizarre. I started having helicopters and drones follow me around. Then it became even more bizarre um, because I started seeing like street theater where there was always ambulance and first responders parked on the side of the road with their lights flashing. Even at this time, I was hopping from hotel to hotel, still doing drugs, going from hotel to hotel, and no matter what hotel I would pull up in, there would be always be two cars that would pull right next to my car. The one time I was leaving out of a hotel room, there was this whole scene where there was a coroner's truck and there was reporters, but nothing was actually happening. It was just like a whole bunch of commotion for no reason. Now, as I'm going through this, I am researching a lot of the things that's happening to me because I'm like, I'm not crazy. This is actually happening. Like at this point, I had been dealing with it for a little while, and I knew that it was actually happening. Um, to go back a little bit, someone had told me a couple of weeks before I looked it up to that it sounded like what I was going through was gang stalking. Now this at the time that I was told that it was called gang stalking, I didn't believe the person because it just didn't sound right. Gang stalking, what's gang stalking? So I paid it no mind, you know. And then there's one day, a lot of activity was going on, and it was just I mean, so much activity that it was at the beginning. I didn't know what to do, and I drove all the way back to Chicago from Philadelphia. I was that nervous, but what I noticed was I was still being followed. So from Philly to Chicago, it never stopped. And so at that point, I decided to look up the gang stalking thing. I don't know why, but it popped in my head, and I looked it up. And when I looked it up, whatever website it was, and I'm sure I can never find that website again because it seemed like it was meant for me to look it up and find it at that particular moment. This website that I found was describing or explaining exactly to the T of what I was going through. Like it basically said, "Do you stay in hotel rooms? And when you pull up into hotel rooms, is do people always check in to the rooms next door? Is there always cars parked right next to yours?" Things that were actually happening every time I would check into a hotel. They were describing. So, um, so the first reaction I had to that was, okay, um, well, I was relieved because I thought it was DEA or the police officers at me because I was on drugs, and of course I'm paranoid. I'm thinking about police officers, and I kept seeing police too. That's part of it, and so it freaked me out. So when I realized that it wasn't police after I read what gang stalking was, I was relieved, and then it became a little bit like, okay, I'm relieved. It's not about jail, but then I became a bit frightened because I'm like, well, what's going on? Why is this happening? Like, and then it was saying that it was technology and that it was, the very first information I got from it was the whole military government technology aspect of it, which of course I think plays a part into it. But as I've progressed in this program, I realized that that's just a tactic of the devil to make you feel hopeless. So, but at this point in my walk, I thought that that's what it was, and it started freaking me out. Like, well, they're experimenting on me, but then I realized that they could hear me whenever I talked. So I would just talk and I would say some of the most vile things to them. And they would laugh, and I mean, the people who I was making fun of wouldn't laugh, but everyone else around would laugh. And then I would go to the next person, and that person would stop laughing, and then everybody else would be laughing at him. And it became kind of like my way of dealing with it. Like, I would get angry, and I would go around, and I would get mad, and I would retaliate. Like, they would drive 90 miles per hour in their car behind me, and I would hit my brakes on purpose. Because what I noticed is that they wouldn't touch me. They wouldn't physically harm me. They had hate in their face towards me, but they weren't actually physically touching me. So what I started to do was play their own game back. I started to do the same exact thing that they would do to me. When I walked into a store, I would go right up to the next person, just like they would do to me, and pick up something in front of the other person, just to kind of be annoying, right? And then one day I was driving along the highway, and the activity, it was a lot going on, and so I pulled over onto one of those rest stops along the highway, and I sat over on a bench that was far away from the rest stop so that I can be by myself just for a minute, just to breathe. And I said to myself, if evil like this exists, then God must exist. And I didn't mean to say God, I meant to say good. But when I said God, something resonated as true. I'm like, oh my gosh, God. So, okay, I'm driving along, and it stuck with me. I don't know why, but it stuck with me when I said God. So, okay, yeah, well, maybe God is true. Like this. Then I started looking at it a little bit different. Like, okay, the devil and God. Like, if evil like this exists, then God must be true. That was in my head. So I'm driving along, and the activity's going on, and I freaked out and said, Jesus, please help me. God, please help me. And the activity stopped. Cars just started being normal. I'm like, what? It I'm looking around, and like, everyone's driving normal. They're not driving 90 miles per hour above me. It's clearing away. So that's when I first noticed the power of God and what Jesus could do. Right? And I don't know if it works like this on purpose, if they're supposed, like, the first time you mention them, because now when I mention God or Jesus, yes, they do stop their activity, but not right away. Not like they did when I first said it, when I first called out to them. Now, when I call out to them, or I play my Christian music, or I read scriptures of the Bible, they'll try to hold on as long as they can to try to act like it's not affecting them, when I know it actually is, because they can only take but so much before they leave. But when it first happened, when I first said it, it was an immediate reaction. They stopped. So then, and now mind you, I hadn't stopped doing the drugs at this point. I was still doing drugs. But at this point, I noticed the power of God. And so whenever I would be out, instead of making fun of them, I would just talk about God and about the evil that they were doing. And a lot of the things that I was saying, now at this point I hadn't picked up the Bible at all, but a lot of the things I was saying was biblical, and I didn't know it until much later. But I would say things that, and I don't even remember off the top of my head some of the things I was saying, but they were powerful, and they were coming through me, not on my own accord. Like, it was things in the biblically that I was saying that I kind of remember from childhood, but it was like I was almost reciting uh, Bible verses that I had never really read as an adult for myself. And I would see the activity. I would see how they would either leave or try to get away from me, or it would just slow down the activity. And at that point, I knew that this was something bigger than just technology, government, and military. This is something else, you know. And then I get 302'd by my mother. I got 302'd because when I first found out what gang stalking was, I went on Facebook and I said, "Oh my God, if I'm dead or if somebody tries to kill me, it's gang stalking." And of course, and I went on Facebook and I blasted that out. And I go to my mother's house after going to different hotels, and um she 302'd me. Like, I came in and she gave me a hug, and she was acting normal, and we were having, she was going to work, so, and I wanted to lay down and get some sleep. I had been up for several days, and next thing you know, there's a knock at the door, and there's 5 police officers outside to take me to a mental hospital. Well, luckily, I had just read what the tactics were for gang stalking. Now, mind you, this is when I believed in the military, government, and um, technology aspect of it. And I had just read the day before I got 302 that part of uh, the end game to this, there was 5 things, and one of them was to put you in a psychiatric ward to discredit you. Like, it was suicide, homelessness, mental psychiatric ward patient, um, isolation. Those were some of the end game things to this program. So I just read about the trying to get you committed. So when I went to the psychiatric ward and I had an evaluation, I was literally there all of 10 or 15 minutes because I didn't tell them. I told him that I wrote a. He asked, why are you here? I said, oh, I meant to send a private message to someone on Facebook, but I actually sent it out to all of Facebook, and my mom saw it, and she misread it and misunderstood it. But that was it. I don't know why I'm here. And then we talked a little bit further, and he, did his evaluation, and I was gone within 15 minutes. He said there was nothing wrong with me. I was perfectly fine. So I escaped that. So I was never labeled as crazy, never given any meds, never psychotic or anything like that. But I knew that was part of it. At that point, I go home and I open up the Bible. And when I open up the Bible, it turns to the book of Psalms. And I started reading Psalms, and I was in awe. I was shocked because everything that King David was singing about, or praying about, or writing his poetry about was exactly what I was going through. And I'm looking and reading this, and I'm saying to myself, how is someone going through what I'm going through in, I don't know when that book was written, but like in ancient times, how is he going through exactly what I'm going through now? Like, he was talking about how people are always, how his enemies are around him on every side, and the dogs barking, and it was very strange to me, and I soaked it up. So the Book of Psalms is what really, really solidified my relationship with Christ and coming towards Him, because I knew that book was real at that point, because there's no way that a book that's written in ancient times can still relate to what I am experiencing right now. And so I soaked it up. I began to read the Bible. I began to see the same program in the Bible, so to speak. Like, some of the same things that was happening to a lot of the characters in the Bible was happening to me, and some of the things that God would say about your enemy, and you know. But the one doctrine that the Bible was telling me was different from what I was doing. I told you guys that I used to be really mean, or I would do exactly the same things that they would do to me. And then I realized that I can't do that because I look like them. If someone else is going through what I was going through, and they saw me doing the same exact things that they were doing to me, then I would look like one of the perps myself. So I didn't realize that I could no longer do that. And then I started reading what Jesus would talk about. And Jesus was saying that if someone slaps you, if someone to turn the other cheek. Like if someone slaps you, then turn the other cheek and give them the other cheek. Or if someone steals from you, steals your coat, your overcoat, give them your another coat. Or I forget how it's saying, but basically saying to just be kind in the face of the enemy. And there's this one passage in the Bible. I don't know which Bible because, like I said, I'm still a babe, but I do know um, the lessons. And I remember in this one part it says to be kind to your enemy, for doing so you drop heaps of coal on their head, upon their head. And I said, oh, so that way I not only am I set apart from the world, but I look different from them too. Because if they come to me and they're making fun of me, or they ask me for money, so like, give them the money. Even though you know they're your enemy, even though you know that they don't like you, still give it to them. Even though I was broke and didn't have money, it just seemed that it didn't matter. Like the people around always want to use you. Always want to use you. Always want to use you. And it makes you feel like you don't want to help them. You feel you become bitter. And what I learned is you're supposed to take that bitterness and turn it into a blessing, because it's a good thing that these people are treating you the way that they're treating you, for you inherit the kingdom. When you're set apart and when people start to hate you, it says it in the Bible, when people start hating you for no reason, you should rejoice in that, because you're being set apart. And so I rejoice now. I've been going through this for 3 years. I've got baptized a month ago. I read the Bible every day. I am no longer on drugs. I've been 4 months clean, even though it feels like a lifetime now. Um, I was also put in jail. I should back up. I was also put in jail, and being put in jail was, because I got caught with drugs. Being put in jail was the scariest thing in my life, because I come from the corporate world, never been in trouble in my life. And going in jail for the first time, I cried like a baby. I had no idea what to expect. And not that I ever will want to go back ever again to experience it, but I would say that that was probably the best time that I had in that year, because I met some people who were struggling in their lives with a lot of the same things that I was going through, with addiction and family life and losing friends. And it wasn't what I expect. Jail wasn't what I expected it to be. God set me down. I picked up the Bible and I was reading the Bible, even though I was still lukewarm then, because I was still looking at Buddhism and reading Buddhist books, but I also had the Bible at this point in time too, and I was soaking it in. Anyway, I got out of jail, wound up moving to Georgia. I go to church every Sunday, even though I don't really like the church, because they have a way about them. I do believe that it's a lot of witchcraft that's inside the church, and all of that good stuff. But I go there for the word. I am still going through a lot of the gang stalking. But what I notice is, so there's two things about this gang stalking. There's one where there's laws to this gang stalking. Well, one of the first laws that I realized is that they don't touch you. It's a no touch type of thing. It's all mental. Second thing I noticed is that if you're doing anything that is letting the devil have the rights to do things to you, your gang stalking is going to be much worse. For instance, if you're doing any sin, if you're living in sin, if you're doing drugs, if you're drinking, if you are trying to retaliate in a mean way, if you are doing anything that is not that is sin, you are allowing the devil access to do even more damage to you mentally. You're giving them um, the rights to basically really stalk you, to really hurt you, to really harm you. And they could eventually kill you through you letting them, from you giving them access. They can get into your mind so much that you would commit suicide. And there are people in the gang stalking and targeting world that have committed suicide. And I would say that most of those suicides were because they hadn't stopped their sin. And I would say that most of them probably realized that it was spiritual and hadn't stopped their sin. I'm not saying that if you go to Jesus that it's going to stop. I personally, there's some people out there who say that it will, but the devil is always going to be attacking you regardless, and especially if you go to Jesus. But I would say that they are, once you go to Jesus and you're not sinning and you're trying to walk right with God, they don't have as much access to you. A lot of my targeting has simmered down. Yes, I still see the helicopters. I still get followed. I'm still ganged. I still see the witchcraft signs and everything. That was another thing. I discovered right after I graduated from the technology, government, military stance to the targeting, I graduated to the witchcraft, Satanist, Luciferian, and I realized that was a part of it. But then I graduated even further to it just being controlled by the devil himself, and then there's Jesus Christ, and that we are at war, and that this is the spiritual warfare, and that you must resist the world, and that's part of it. And I'm not saying that when you resist the world that it's going to stop. Like I said, it hasn't stopped, but what it has done is it's not allowed them to go any further in destroying me, if that makes any sense. Um, they have to stay away from me, and I can say Jesus, I can listen to my Christian music, and they will leave. They will definitely stop bothering me. Of course, 5 minutes later, they're right back at it again. But I know that He's my defense. I know that, and I thank Him every day, because even though I'm going through this turmoil, I thank Him because I was a non believer. And without this happening, I needed something supernatural to happen in order for me to believe. And it blows my mind now thinking and looking back all the things that I used to do and not aware that Jesus was there. It makes me feel horrible that I just didn't believe in him and that I turned my back on him, when now that I'm going through turmoil, now I'm coming to him, and almost feel like I'm using him in a way. But let me tell you, Jesus wants to be used in that way. He wants you to call out to him when you're going through turmoil, when you're going through stress and trauma. He wants you to realize that he's there, and that he's holding you, and that he's exalting you, and that you can't do it alone, and that you need him. Because philosophies like Buddhism and Taoism and the yin and yang, knowing that there's a good and evil, how does that help you? How does that bring you salvation? Just knowing that there's good and evil. Or how does knowing that it's technology and government and military, where's your hope come from? The law? I mean, we know that the law itself is a part of all of this. So it's like, where do you get your hope from? And the minute I turned to Jesus Christ, and I started reading his words and what the words were saying about salvation and not feeling hopeless, it just strengthened me. It gave me the power and the strength to walk bold and not be scared and not be afraid and not to worry about this. Yes, do I worry about it? I mean, it's you can't help it because they're always in your face. Like I block it out as much as I possibly can, but they try to get your attention. They will go out of their way to get your attention. I mean, there's all types of things that they do, all types of theatrics that they pull, just to get that emotion out of you. What I learned is that they're harvesting our emotions, our negative emotions. So they want to see you scared. They want to see you angry. They want to see you sad. They want to see, So those are like the things that I try not to give them. That's why I put on my Christian music and I blast up the music and I'll dance and they'll leave me alone for the most part. They'll still try to show me because I I've also during this gotten the discernment to see the signs and the symbols, and I'm sure you guys all know what I'm talking about with the signs and the symbols, the triangles and the 666, and then I can see it in just everyday things too now, like the dogs are like a big one, and I love dogs and cats. So, but every witch has a dog, every Satanist has a dog, and they use them as familiar spirits and all of that good stuff. So yes, once they know that you're aware of something, they'll keep showing it to you, to desensitize you from that symbol. But I've gotten to the point where I look at the symbols as well. In your world, you need to represent your God. So you have to wear certain colors and you have to show symbols and you have to flash signs in order that in order that your God is being seen and worshiped. My God doesn't have symbols and signs because everything is him. And that's how I look at it. Even the triangle, even the eye, even the color patterns, even the dogs, that's all my gods. So I don't need to wear certain colors. I don't need to flash certain signs because everything that is around me is God's. Is Jesus Christ. So I'm like I used to like not wear certain color clothing because I didn't want to be associated with them, or not wear the Adidas sign because there was a triangle on it. But then I'm thinking to myself, and I read the Bible. These are all His. They don't have dominion over the things of this world. They use them as symbols to make you think that they have some type of power. But the real power is in where those symbols come from, and they come from Jesus Christ himself. So I can wear whatever sign I want. I can wear whatever color I want. It's not representing anything evil. I bless it. I bless everything that I take because everything in this world is evil. I'm telling you, I can't look at one show. I can't look at one record. I can't listen to one record. I can't go into one store without seeing all the demonic things around me. And so what I have done in my own situation is turn that in my head around to, well, even though it's symbolizing the devil, he needs to be recognized because without recognition, he doesn't exist, right? So he needs to be recognized, especially when you're in this spiritual realm. He wants to be worshipped. He wants you to know that he's there. But I go above him and say, well, okay, well, you need to be recognized. But what I see in that is that you are a creation of my God. Everything is a creation of my gods. He's the Alpha and the Omega. He's the beginning and the end. And so there's nothing that you have that's not his. So I'm no longer desensitized by the witchcraft that's being thrown my way. If that makes any sense. Um, well, that was just my testimony. That's just a little bit. There's so much other things, so many other things in between those little stories that I told you that has happened, that has been supernatural, that has occurred, that there's no doubt in my mind that God exists. There's no doubt in my mind that we're living in the end times. There's no doubt in my mind that Jesus is my Savior and my salvation. I cling to Him. I pray to Him. I love Him and no one else. And don't get me wrong, I still struggle in a lot of areas of my life. I do know I will never ever pick up another drug again. I do know that. He's bought me out of that. And let me tell you, I've been through rehab. I went to jail. I and none of it worked. The only thing that worked is really realizing that Jesus is my salvation. And once I realized that Jesus was my salvation, I completely stopped. I mean, even after rehab, I went right back to doing drugs. Once I realized that Jesus was my salvation and that He's in my corner and that we are going to win this victory, I stopped. And I don't. I struggle, but I know for a fact I'm never going back to it. I know for a fact. Um, and He's been my strength through a lot. And as I'm walking in this journey, and I'm doing it by myself because, like I said, I go to church, but I don't really want to be a part of the church. I go there to listen to the word and just to be in Jesus for a moment, because I know that Christmas is not really, it's paganism. I know that Halloween and Easter, so I know that even the church is influenced by the demons. So a lot of it, I don't have any friends. I don't talk to anyone. I live at home with my mother. But that's an iffy situation. That's a whole nother topic. Um, so I'm isolated. I'm by myself, but I still go out. I still drive around. I still go to the mall. I still buy things, and I like to be around the people because I like for them to see what Jesus is doing, the light that's in me. So sometimes I'll just get in my car just to ride around, just to to be out there because I'm not afraid of them at all. If I had a place that I could go to every single day, because I don't have a job, still, I'm on disability at this point, which I didn't think I was going to get, but God is great. God will provide. If you pray to Him, and He knows what you need, He will give it to you. Um, Even if the devil thinks that he has uh, something to do with it, and maybe he does, ultimately it's God's decision to do things for you, and so I thank Him for everything. Um, I'm also back in school getting my Christian ministry degree. I go to Indiana Wesleyan University. I want to minister to the children. My main thing right now is the children because I don't want anyone to grow up not knowing who Jesus Christ is and then having to face this spiritual warfare that I went through and not having the protection of Jesus Christ. And I feel bad for the kids that are growing up in these households where the immorality and the sex and the robots and the technology is just warping their minds and turning them away from really, really knowing Jesus Christ. So I'm hoping that after I graduate school that I could start my own ministry up and maybe counsel to the children of this world who really is not getting uh, fed the good bread. They're not eating the right bread. And so I just wanted to put it out there and give a brief testimony of how I came to Jesus Christ, how I know that He's real, how I know that He saves, and there's hope and salvation. If you are a targeted individual, go to Jesus Christ. Just test it out. Just call out His name when you're feeling sad, or when they're surrounding you, or when there's a lot of activity. Just cling to Him, or open up your Bible and read Psalms. Read the Psalms. I'm telling you, just read the Psalms, and when you read it, just look at it and realize how it mirrors your own life. It's so much in there that King David is saying. Okay, guys, I'm gonna go. This was actually longer than I expected. God bless you, and have a great day. Bye.